Who could have imagined that I would be reborn into the week before Evans confessed to his first love? That night, when they rekindled their love and were sweetly together again, I died on the cold operating table. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing as I looked at the man sleeping beside me. I never thought I would be reborn, back to a week before my death. I clearly remember the day I died. The loud crash, the roar of flames, the cold operating table. But nothing compared to the despair in my heart. It was the 4th anniversary of me and Evans being together. A friend secretly told me Evans had booked a famous couple's restaurant and that she had seen him buying a diamond ring. I eagerly looked forward to his proposal and arrived early to surprise him. But I had no idea that this would be the beginning of my nightmare. I watched him, with a gentle look on his face, kiss another woman and put a ring on her finger. That woman was his first love, Mia. I watched them embrace and head to a hotel, while Evans's apologetic voice echoed from my phone. "I'm staying late at work tonight, won't be home." Heartbroken, I drove, crying with blurred vision. I lost focus for a second and ended up under the wheels of a semi-truck. That night, when they were sweetly reunited, I died on the cold operating table. Turning to look at Evans, the man I loved throughout my youth, he still looked as handsome as ever. But all I felt was disillusionment. I spent the whole night awake. The next morning before Evans left, he, as usual, tried to give me a good morning kiss, but I dodged it. "We should break up." The moment I said it, I felt a sudden release. Evans looked surprised for a moment, but then he asked nonchalantly, "Why so suddenly? What happened?" He scrutinized me, but his phone kept ringing insistently. Over and over again, the name on the screen read Mia. He gave my shoulder a quick squeeze and told me to wait for him to come back to talk, then hurriedly left. Without a second thought, I packed all my things and returned to my luxury apartment. I did not regret loving Evans. He was my every fluttering heartbeat, my youth. But I would never love him again. I was going to dig him out of my heart piece by piece. Evans was the epitome of success, a rising entrepreneur. But he never knew what lay behind his success. Since I was a good girl who had been obedient all my life, I had cut ties with my family for him. My father, though proud, couldn't bear to see me struggle and secretly helped him out. Evans had always been proud and arrogant, and I had always accommodated him. Perhaps because of this, he thought he could control everything, even reconciling with his first love behind my back. Looking back, my parents were right. Some people can weather hardships together but cannot share wealth. This time, I lost the gamble. Thinking of this, I called home, and hearing my mother's voice, which was trying to suppress her sobs, my heart ached. "Come home, Coco, your father and I will support you for life." What had I done these past few years to make my loving family so sad? I couldn't imagine how they would feel when they found out about my death. Losing a child to old parents. It would break their hearts. I promised my father that I was determined to help with the family business. I returned to my circle, the one that Evans could never reach. As the representative of Ling Group, I had been born into privilege. When my phone rang again, it was already evening. I glanced at it. Evans had probably reconciled with Mia by now and was free to deal with me. I smiled, blocking his contact, and then began reviewing the tender proposals sent by my assistant. The only thing I was thankful for was that I had never given up on my career for Evans. Years of work experience allowed me to handle problems with ease. I was still the Coco my parents could be proud of. A few days later, I attended the tender meeting as Ling Group's representative. This time, I was the client. I knew Evans would show up, but I could face him without a single ripple in my heart. But then, Evans lost control in front of everyone. He looked at me in disbelief, and his shock was obvious on his face. Evans had once looked at me with eyes full of love. But now, when that look was tainted with other emotions, I realized it was no different from anyone else. "The tender meeting officially begins," I said with a smile, not glancing at him again. The results would be announced in a few days. During this time, my father planned to hold a banquet to announce that I would be the new CEO of Ling Group. I happily agreed. This was the life that truly belonged to me. However, I didn't expect that the organizer would invite Evans too. As I slowly descended the spiral staircase in my custom-made gown, I saw the amazed gazes of the crowd, including Evans and Mia. Of course, Evans had brought Mia as his date. It was clear what that meant. I shook my head slightly and moved to the center of attention. After the event, I began to socialize with my father's friends. Networking was tiring, but accumulating connections was comforting. Finally, I had a moment to rest. As I entered my private lounge, I was suddenly pulled into a hug. The sudden warmth from his body almost made me gasp, but I managed to suppress it. When I used to have intimate contact with Evans, it always made me shiver, but now, I was only startled. He looked at me confidently, as if certain I would fall for his charms again. I raised my head to look at this man I once knew so well. "Evans, this is not the place for you." His smile vanished instantly. His eyes turned red as he almost gritted his teeth and asked, "Coco, why haven't you said anything to me?" I pushed against his chest with a firm hand, forcefully shoving him away. He stumbled backward, his face showing a wounded expression. I lowered my gaze. I didn't think it was necessary before, and it's even less necessary now. "Evans, don't forget, we've already broken up." Evans stood frozen, staring at me, before softly speaking, "Don't be mad, Coco. You love me so much. How could you leave me?" Did I love him that much? Yes, I once believed I would love him forever. But this time, with my rebirth, we were separated by the chasm of life and death. I would never go back. I looked at him, speaking each word clearly. "Just consider it that I was foolish before. From now on, there's no connection between us." Evans's face changed drastically, as if he had been struck by something deep. He stumbled backward. At that moment, the lounge door opened. My mom appeared, looking at the tense standoff between Evans and me. There was no surprise on her face, just a soft voice saying, "Your friend is here. You've been upset lately. Let him take you out to clear your mind." Before I could respond, I heard the roar of a motorbike. Through the window, I saw a tall, handsome man dismounting from a flashy motorcycle, casually tossing his helmet to the door attendant. Under the gaze of everyone, Wade walked up to me, seemingly unfazed by the attention. He extended his hand, smiling with carefree confidence. "Coco, welcome back." Behind Wade, Evans's face turned a shade of pale as he stared at us. As I stood by Wade's motorcycle, I still felt a little disoriented. How had I ended up with him? Wade, the son of the Chu family, a close family friend, and my childhood playmate, had always been a bit reckless, indulging in every bit of mischief. A few years ago, right around the time I chased after Evans and left home, Wade had gone abroad to work as a freelance photographer. In the years since, I'd heard little from him, except for a few photos he'd sent, showing the countries he'd visited or some landscapes he'd captured. Occasionally, there were some portraits with unrecognizable figures. Wade patted the back seat of his motorcycle and casually tossed me a helmet. "Aren't you getting on?" I pointed to my high heels and evening gown, raising an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Cheech, you're such a hassle," Wade muttered, jumping off and quickly taking off his coat. In the next moment, he reached over and wrapped his arm around my waist. Our bodies were so close it almost made me panic. I gasped slightly, instinctively tilting my head back, and I could see the slight stubble on his chin. Wade's breath was near me, both unfamiliar and yet familiar. Years had changed me, and it seemed, him as well. He was more mature, more charismatic. Before I could push him away, Wade quickly tied his coat around my waist and took a few steps back with an innocent smile. "Coco, your waist is still as slender as ever. What maturity? What charisma? Was I just imagining it? Shut up!" I glared at him, then obediently sat on the motorcycle. Riding with Wade was my parents' idea. If it made them feel at ease, I would go along with it. The motorcycle roared to life and sped off, the wind rushing past my neck. The feeling of flying almost immediately made me understand why people were so drawn to this sport. My heart lightened as well. But gradually I began to feel something wasn't right. A near instinctive panic set in, like cold seawater soaking into my bones. I couldn't help but shiver slightly. I realized, without even realizing it, Wade had driven us to the very spot where I had crashed my car. Wade eventually stopped at the foot of a mountain, and we only passed by the road. Even so, the sweat that broke out across my body was cold. We reached the mountaintop, where the view was vast, the stars enchanting, yet Wade seemed to immediately sense something was wrong with me. His deep eyes searched me as though looking straight into my soul. "Coco, what's wrong?" he asked. I knew he wasn't just asking about the present moment, he was asking about everything. Suddenly, I felt an urge to speak. This thing had been pressing on my heart for too long, and if there was an outlet to talk, I have a friend, I began. I told Wade my story as if it were just a tale. Wade was silent for a moment. Then suddenly, with a hoarse voice, he asked, "How does your friend feel about it? Has she thought about revenge?" I nodded without hesitation. "She has." He suddenly laughed and ruffled my hair. "My Coco hasn't changed, still the same silly girl." I realized then Wade had already known what Evans had done to me. When we returned, I was calm. But just as I was about to close the door, Wade barged in. Before I could react, he had already shut the door behind him. Wade looked at me innocently. "I just got back from abroad and I haven't figured out where to stay. I'm going to take a shower. I'm exhausted." Without waiting for my response, he walked off toward the bathroom. I shook my head, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. His personality hadn't changed at all. I ordered takeout, and soon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, to my surprise, it wasn't the delivery guy. It was Evans standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted, as if he had been running around all day. Of course, he had to handle both his company's matters and comfort Mia. How could he not be tired? "Coco, I came to explain. I took a step back and flashed a polite smile. "Evans, I'm not interested in your explanation." Shocked by the coldness of my response, Evans took a step forward. At that moment, the bathroom door opened. I froze as Wade stepped out, wrapped in a towel. Seeing Evans, he didn't shy away, instead narrowing his eyes and smiling. "It's a little inappropriate to interrupt us so late, don't you think?" Wade said. Evans turned pale and quickly left. I looked at Wade helplessly. "Why do you have to do things that will make people misunderstand?" Wade leaned closer to me and I could almost smell the mix of body wash and warmth from his skin. It was the scent of my favorite little violet flower. The air between us grew thick with unspoken tension. He whispered, "What if I told you I didn't want this to be a misunderstanding?" My heart skipped a beat, and I looked up to see his earnest expression. Wade was looking at me with such sincerity as though he was hoping for an answer. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again. "That's the takeout." I quickly turned my head. Wade muttered a disappointed "oh" as he watched me, the subtle sadness in his voice unmistakable. I took a deep breath, relieved to escape the awkward moment. Wade casually sprawled on my couch, eating the takeout with one hand while giving me a thoughtful smile. "I've got an idea. Do you want to hear it?" Wade was never one to be restrained by the rules, always acting on impulse. But this time, when I heard his idea, I didn't immediately reject it. I took a deep breath. "Sure, but I want to plan it." Wade shrugged, letting out a chuckle, as if agreeing without much care. "Whatever, you're the boss." I glanced at the calendar on the wall. The day was fast approaching, the day I had died in the car accident, the day I had seen Evans betray me. When that day came, I would be ready. I had decided to wear the same clothes I had worn that day, but my mindset had already completely changed. I didn't contact Wade in advance. I knew that after that day he would disappear, just like he always did. I needed to confront Evans and make peace with the past, with myself. I knew deep down that if I didn't get over this hurdle, I would never truly be reborn. I would forever be stuck in that nightmare. I arrived early at the restaurant, only to unexpectedly see Mia, who was already pacing outside. She seemed to be surveying the place, looking for the perfect angle. Just then, I received a message from a friend. Soon enough, Evans showed up. He didn't seem as energetic as before, his usual confident demeanor absent. They entered the restaurant and Mia smiled at him as she spoke. But then her expression suddenly froze, and she quickly started to look like she was about to cry. She seemed so fragile and pitiful, as though she were the one who needed to be comforted. She pulled out a ring and offered it to Evans. He didn't accept it. Instead, he stood up to leave, and Mia, following him, stood up too. She staggered a little and Evans caught her, leading her to the nearby hotel. Things seemed different this time. A bold thought crossed my mind. I stood up quickly, and just as I did, I saw Mia kiss him. Evans didn't resist. I closed my eyes, shutting off the chaotic emotions swirling in my mind. Even though I knew that Mia was intentionally letting me see this, Evans still didn't reject her advances. And that message he had sent, "I'm staying late at work tonight, won't be home," it had been true. Without a second of hesitation, I walked up to Evans, and, with a slight smile in my eyes, I spoke. "There's nothing left to explain now, is there?" Evans opened his mouth, but no words came out. Evans, I once chased after you, ignoring everything else in my life, thinking you were everything. Now I know you're not as dazzling as I once thought. It was just me, looking at you with a light in my eyes. I glanced at both of them, my voice soft but firm. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness. But don't ever come back to me. All the memories, the sweetness and the hurt, should never be a part of my life again. With that, I turned to leave, but just as I did, Evans grabbed my hand, holding me back. I struggled, but before I could break free, a force suddenly yanked Evans's arm away. Wade had appeared out of nowhere, stepping in front of me and shielding me behind him. I looked up at Wade's back, feeling an unexpected sense of calm. Breakups should be dignified, Evans, Wade said with a smirk. Otherwise, you'll make it look like Coco put in all this effort and still got hurt. How embarrassing. What do you mean by that? Evans's face turned ashen, clearly angered. Wade looked at him with an almost mocking smile. He threw a file at Evans's chest and then, turning to Mia, said slowly, "You never thought much of Evans because he was poor, right? You left him and went abroad. But when your family went bankrupt and you found out he had become successful, you thought you could win him back." Mia's face shifted dramatically, her eyes widening in disbelief. Wade took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You both can lower your standards as much as you want, but you'll never ever hurt my Coco again." I blinked, stunned. Had Wade been busy with all of this while he was away these past few days? Wade turned to me, his eyes shining like stars. "It's over now. Let's go home." I squeezed his hand and smiled. "All right?" Before we left, I took one last look at Evans. He stood there motionless as if he had turned to stone, slowly crumbling to dust. This time, as Wade drove me back, we passed the spot where my accident had happened. But I didn't feel afraid anymore. When we arrived at what I thought was my apartment, I realized it wasn't. This was my home. The garden had been transformed into a sea of lights, with roses everywhere. It was the most beautiful scene, a dream come true for any woman. Wade confessed to me in front of both our families, and I could hardly believe it. The mischievous boy I had known was now standing there, serious and mature. I still hadn't figured out how I felt about him, but when I saw my parents' hopeful expressions, I knew. I nodded, agreeing to be with him. Wade lifted me up and twirled me around, and I couldn't stop laughing until he finally set me down. After that, he began to pack up his things, moving into my apartment under the excuse of getting to know each other better. It felt nice though. Wade and I had grown up together, and with our family's blessings, it seemed like the right thing to do. The project I had been following had concluded, and my assistant reported that Evans's company had won it. I wasn't surprised. Despite all the help my father had given him, Evans was truly excellent. His abilities were undeniable. I directly took over the public welfare department of Ling Group. This event required my colleagues and me to visit a charity school deep in the mountains. Wade said he wanted to go on a field trip and asked if I could join him. I couldn't refuse him, so I agreed. We had just arrived in Leizhou when it started raining in the mountains. At first we thought it would stop in 2 days, but it rained for an entire week. Conditions in the mountains were limited, and we stayed in a hotel halfway up the mountain. We received a notice that there might be a natural disaster, and we needed to evacuate immediately. But just at that moment, disaster struck. As the mountain started to slide, Wade grabbed me and tried to run, but it was too late. "If this keeps going, we're all going to be in trouble," Wade said quickly. "Listen to me, no matter what happens, you run and don't look back." A bad feeling surged in my heart. In the next second, Wade suddenly shoved me out of the danger zone. I was rescued and taken to a safe area by the rescue workers. In that short distance, I was saved, but I watched helplessly as he was buried by the mud. The rain finally stopped. I stayed up day and night, hoping for news about Wade. The road was blocked, and transportation was difficult. I didn't expect that the first person to arrive would be Evans. I didn't know how he got there, but he brought the most advanced search equipment, which made the rescue operation much more efficient. Evans said nothing but quietly stayed not far from me. More often, he went to join the rescue efforts. I watched him, weary from the journey, and handed him a cup of hot water. I said, "Thank you." In his eyes, there was a flash of pain. His voice was hoarse as he said, "Coco, if I told you I never wanted to hurt you, would you believe me?" I spoke softly. "Does it matter now?" He gave a bitter smile. I was too arrogant. I always thought that the passion was gone between us, That's why I couldn't resist Mia's temptation. But I didn't realize that you had already become a habit to me, like breathing, something I couldn't live without. I sighed and stood up. Evans, it's all in the past. He lowered his head, and I almost heard him choke on his words. Coco, I can't move on. At that moment, I received the news that they had found Wade. I rushed over immediately. Wade was unconscious. He was airlifted to the provincial hospital, and after a consultation, Uncle Chu decided to send him abroad for treatment. I followed. Wade had suffered a head injury and underwent surgery. The doctors said the situation was critical, and there was a high chance he might not wake up. I stayed by his bed, praying for a miracle, hoping he would wake up. But when I came back after dinner that day, I saw a brown-haired beauty sitting by Wade's bed. She had sexy waves and wore a red off-shoulder dress that was very bright. Her hand was caressing Wade's face, looking very intimate. It seemed that Wade had developed close relationships with other women while abroad over the years. I didn't know why, but suddenly I felt a little stifled and wanted to leave. She saw me and straightened up, as if understanding. So, it's you. I could only walk back. I learned her name was Rebecca. She had met Wade a few years ago while traveling in Africa. At that time, she had been harassed by some thugs, and Wade had saved her. We spent a very wonderful time together. I never met a man as nice as Wade. Rebecca said with a nostalgic expression. I stared at Wade. If he had woken up, he would have been knocked out by my gaze at this moment. It's a pity he always had someone in his heart. What does it matter? I asked absently. Rebecca fell silent, and it was only then that I realized what she was hinting at. She flipped her hair and smiled seductively. Would you like to see something? I followed her to a house. Compared to Rebecca's stunning appearance, the interior was overly simple and plain. She pulled out a box, took out a book, and then pulled out a photo. When I saw the photo, I almost stopped breathing. It was a photo of me and Wade, taken at our high school graduation. He had his arm around me, while I was impatiently trying to push him away. The moment was frozen in time. I touched the photo, speechless. The edges had already turned yellow, but it was still well preserved. The person who kept it must have been very careful. If it weren't for his injury this time, we might never have met, Rebecca said with a faint smile. Her expression was still full of longing. Little girl, you make me so jealous. I walked back to the hospital with the photo. Suddenly, I remembered to call my mother and asked her why she wanted me to be with Wade. Silly child, back then you were too focused on chasing Evans. Wade's feelings for you were so obvious, but you never saw it. Your uncle Chu and I knew about it years ago. My heart skipped a beat. I bit my lip, not knowing what to say. After you got together with Evans, Wade went abroad. He hasn't come back in all these years. This time I called him myself. He didn't hesitate for a moment and came back. When I returned to the hospital room, Wade was still lying there quietly. Memories flooded back. Many things I thought I had forgotten had somehow, over time, become firmly etched in my heart. Wade's many moments of wanting to speak but holding back, and the way he looked at me. In the end, he never said anything before leaving. Was it all to let me go? I lay down on the bed, holding Wade's hand. His hand wasn't as warm as before, but it was still as big enough to hold my entire hand. When I woke up, I was already lying in bed and Wade was gone. Just when I thought something had happened to him and rushed to find him, the nurse pushed him into the room in a wheelchair. Wade was back to his lazy self. Weakly, he said, "Finally awake, huh? You really know how to sleep. I don't know whether I'm the patient or you are." Tears flowed uncontrollably from my eyes. Wade immediately panicked and the nurse wisely left the room. I threw myself into his arms and Wade hurriedly caught me. Don't cry. See, I'm fine." Rebecca came by, I said, watching him closely, not missing a single expression. Wade became instantly alert. "What did she say?" She said, "We spent a wonderful time together, and I've never met a man nicer than you. Wade groaned, holding his head. "Wait, I didn't have anything with her. The African savannah was barren. It wasn't anything special." I looked at him without speaking, and slowly a look of joy appeared on his face. "Coco, are you jealous?" He hugged me tightly. "That's great. Let me think about how to celebrate us being together. I was stunned. He knew everything. All my compliance and concessions, he knew about them. He knew, but he never said a word. My heart grew heavier. Wade and I returned home. Evans contacted me through someone, wanting to meet. After thinking for a moment, I agreed. When I met him again, I was shocked at how much he had changed in a few months. He looked so worn out, as if his spirit had been drained, and he no longer had the boldness he once had. Coco, during the time you were gone, I had a dream. His voice was hoarse, as if he had been in great pain. In the dream, just like this time, you saw me with Mia and then you drove away. On the way, you had an accident. Though Evans kept his head lowered, I still saw the tears dripping from his fingers. The painful days I had endured had now become his burden. Whether intentional or not, I believed he truly regretted it. At this moment, I suddenly felt relieved. I've been having this dream. Coco, tell me it's not true, please. Evan's eyes were red and he looked at me with pleading eyes. I smiled and shook my head. It doesn't matter anymore, Evans. I watched as his face slowly darkened and I recognized the look all too well. It was the look of hope being snatched away. Evans closed his eyes. Do you think I want you back for your money and status? He asked cautiously. If I gave you everything, including the company we built together, would you come back to me? I didn't respond. If I cared about those things, I wouldn't have defied my family back then, supporting him while starting from scratch. I sighed and looked at this familiar yet strange face. No need, I've already started a new life. After saying that, I waved behind him. Evans turned around and saw Wade impatiently waiting outside. His face turned pale. I didn't say anything else. After paying, I left. Once outside, Wade tightly grasped my hand. I know a great Japanese restaurant. Should I take you there? I smiled. Sure. That evening when we returned home, Wade covered my eyes and said he had a surprise for me. When he let go, I saw balloons and roses just like the ones in my garden that day. I instantly understood what Wade was trying to say. Tears welled up in my eyes. How fortunate am I? Forget the past. I'll confess to you again, Wade said before kneeling down. He slowly took out a ring from his pocket. Coco, will you be with me? I will protect you and love you, never letting you suffer any grievances. I didn't say anything or move. Wade looked up at me, his expression anxious. I glanced at the ring. Is this just a confession? I thought it was a proposal. Wade's eyes immediately lit up with joy. He grabbed my hand and quickly slipped the ring on my finger. Coco, will you marry me? No, I said, somewhat annoyed as I touched the ring, but he picked me up without hesitation. He whispered in my ear, Coco, you have no idea how happy I am. I've been waiting for this day for so long. I froze, but my tears couldn't stop falling. Wade panicked. He kissed away my tears, then slowly kissed my lips. In this passionate kiss, I slowly let myself go. By the time I regained my senses, I was on the couch. You didn't get it before, but now I'll make it up to you. Wade's voice was deep and husky. Coco, tonight it's just you and me. All these rituals, all this seriousness, this tenderness, these were things I never received when I was with Evans. Wade gave them all to me. I slowly let myself drown in his tenderness, feeling his care for me. The days with Wade were the happiest of my life. It felt like I had returned to the carefree years. But I knew this carefree life wasn't without cost. Wade had shielded me from it all. I suddenly wanted to see what the African savanna that Wade and Rebecca talked about looked like. Having lived so methodically for all these years, before getting back to work, I also wanted to indulge a bit. Without saying a word, Wade agreed. He never objected to my requests. Even my mother was starting to get a little concerned. We arrived at the airport, and just before boarding, I noticed a suspicious figure. A woman in sunglasses and a hat kept staring at us. She looked familiar. As I tried to figure out who she was, she suddenly rushed over and, just before reaching us, pulled a knife from her pocket. In a flash, I recognized her. It was Mia. Just as I thought she was going to attack me, she turned and rushed towards Wade. Go to hell. You ruined me and now you won't survive. I watched in despair as Wade was stabbed, just as security arrived and subdued Mia. She continued to curse wildly. I trembled as I checked Wade's condition, but I didn't find any injury on him. Wade looked at me strangely. Stop touching me. I'm fine. Seeing that I hadn't stopped, he softly said, if you keep this up, it will be bad for you. I glared at him but sighed in relief. If he was still joking, it meant he was really fine. Wade pulled out a box from his pocket and looked at me awkwardly. I was going to ... I opened the box and saw the ring inside. It was a pair of wedding rings, engraved with our names. I suddenly laughed. However, our plans to visit the savannah were delayed. Wade and I went to the police station for questioning. It was then that I learned that after Mia had been exposed by Wade, her father had failed to secure Evans's financial support and had fled with the money. Creditors came after Mia, demanding she pay off the debts, and she had to hide everywhere, suffering greatly. She believed Wade was the one responsible for all her misery, so she wanted to take revenge. Wade held my hand as we left the police station. "This is karma," he said. If she had borrowed the money properly, Evans might have helped her, but she chose to use these tactics. I pulled out my phone. "There's a flight to Africa in an hour ... Hurry, hurry! I can't wait to enjoy the world with you." Wade tugged me forward. This trip, Wade and I went to many places. I insisted on following his route from those years. I didn't expect that he, alone, had traveled to so many countries. Even in places that felt empty and lonely to us, how had he survived alone? We saw wild animals running in the savannah and we visited the ancient pyramids. Under the stars, we embraced, watching the moonlight blend our shadows together, as if making up for the missing parts of each other. When Wade took out the ring again, he couldn't help but laugh. I'm so annoyed with myself for spoiling the surprise ... I smiled as he put the ring on my finger. He kissed my hand seriously. "This time you can't escape." I murmured, "I never planned to escape." We returned to our country not long after. Our parents began preparing for the wedding. Wade, who had never been nervous about anything, was incredibly anxious the night before the wedding. He went to the living room to get some water. I couldn't sleep either, so I went out to the balcony to catch some fresh air. A cool breeze blew, and as I looked up at the stars, I knew tomorrow would be a perfect day. Looking down, I saw a familiar car parked below. There was someone leaning beside it, the red light from their cigarette flickering. I didn't know how long they had been standing there. When they saw me come out, they suddenly stood straight, then lowered their head when they saw Wade, who had draped a coat over me. Wade murmured, "Tomorrow, you'll finally see the bride, and yet you're still so impatient." I stood on my toes and kissed his lips. A mischievous thought suddenly crossed my mind. "Aren't you worried?" Wade tightened his arm around me. "Worried? I've spoiled you so much already. No one will ever compare to me in your eyes." I smiled and gripped his hand tightly, but he swept me off my feet. "Let's go to sleep. Tomorrow is our big day." Our wedding was grand and we received everyone's blessings. I could almost see how happy my future would be. I'm so grateful that fate gave me a second chance to find Wade. Being with the right person is truly a form of completeness.